Hello, everyone. Welcome to SysGuide's YouTube channel. In this video, I will show you how to properly dual boot Windows 11 and Ubuntu. There are many reasons why you might want a dual boot system. Whatever the reason, the most obvious advantage is the ability to optimize hardware performance across all operating systems. I am assuming that you already have a system running some edition of Windows 11. For this tutorial, I will use Windows 11 Home as an example. However, it could be any edition of Windows 11 or even Windows 10. Here is a quick overview of partition layout for dual boot. For this tutorial, I will be using a 200 gigabyte disk. And so this is how the partition layout appears at the beginning of the tutorial. By the end of the tutorial, after resizing and aligning the partitions, and then installing Ubuntu for dual boot, this is how the partition layout will look. This is a complete step-by-step tutorial from start to finish. So please make sure you watch the video all the way to the end so you don't miss anything. So let's begin. Open the disk management application. For this tutorial, I will be using a 200 gigabyte disk. And here is how the partitions appear on my Windows 11. The C drive, where Windows 11 is installed, takes up a significant amount of disk space. Let me show you how the partitions are arranged using DiskPart. List the available disks. As you can see, I only have one 200 gigabyte disk, and there is no more free disk space. List the partitions based on the partition layout shown here. To properly install Ubuntu for a dual boot system, I need to make certain changes. First, I need to shrink the Windows partition to make room for Ubuntu. I will set the new size of this Windows partition to 100 gigabytes. The EFI system partition is only 100 megabytes. This is insufficient if I want to include Linux distributions. So I need to make it bigger. I'm going to expand this partition to 1 gigabyte. The recovery partition is 768 megabytes with approximately 83 megabytes of free space. Let me show you the free space. As you can see, the recovery partition has a total size of 768 megabytes and approximately 83 megabytes of free space. Microsoft recommends having 250 megabytes of free space for future updates. So I am going to expand this recovery partition to 1 GB. I will also add System Rescue Toolkit to the dual boot. System Rescue is a Linux rescue toolkit that can be booted and used to manage or repair your system and data in the event of a crash on both Linux and Windows operating systems. It only takes 1 gigabyte of space. The Windows built-in disk manager does not allow you to properly alter the partitions. You will need another tool to do this. You need gparted live for this. So go to the GNOME Partition Editor website. And download the ISO. After downloading the ISO image, make a bootable gparted live USB image using a third-party tool such as Rufus. There are already numerous tutorials online on how to use Rufus. But before you boot into the gparted live USB image, make sure BitLocker is turned off. This is very important. Otherwise, you risk bricking your computer. You can enable it later once all Windows partitions have been recreated. Shut down your computer. Boot your computer using the gparted live USB image. Select the first option and press enter. Select your key map. I will just select the default option, don't touch key map. Select your language. I will just use the default US English. I prefer the GUI mode. So I will just press enter. The gparted application will be opened by default. First, I need to shrink the Windows partition to 100 gigabytes to make room for the Ubuntu Linux operating system. So right-click on the Windows partition and select the resize option. Also, the EFI system partition is only 100 megabytes. So I need to increase it to 1 GB. That means I will need to free up additional 924 megabytes of space on the left side to expand the EFI system partition. So I will set the preceding space value to 924 megabytes and press enter. Next, I need to shrink the partition from the right side. I will set the new size to 100 gigabytes. As you can see, I now have enough unallocated free space to install Ubuntu Linux. Press the resize button and apply. The resizing operation will begin. Because I am resizing the partition from both the left and right sides, the data needs to be moved. It will take some time to finish the job. So please be patient. Resizing is now complete. For me, it took about 20 minutes. As you can see, the Windows partition has shrunk to 100 gigabytes. There is 924 megabytes of unallocated space on the left side of the Windows partition, which I will use later to expand the EFI system partition. And on the right, there is approximately 98 gigabytes of unallocated space. The next step is to place the Windows recovery partition right next to the Windows partition. This is what Microsoft recommends. Microsoft also recommends having 250 megabytes of free space in the recovery partition. However, as you can see, in my case, the recovery partition is only 768 megabytes in size, with about 680 megabytes already used. And there's only about 87 megabytes free. This means that the recovery partition must be not only relocated, but also enlarged. So right-click on the recovery partition and click on the resize option. Click and hold the left mouse button on the small recovery partition. Drag all the way to the left, and then release the mouse button. Make sure that the preceding space is 0, which means there is no unallocated space between the Windows and recovery partitions. Now set the new size to 1024 megabytes, which equals 1 gigabytes. Click the resize button, and then apply. As you can see now, the Microsoft Reserve partition has been moved directly next to the Windows partition with enlarged size of 1 GB. And with about 343 megs of free space, which is more than 250 megabytes as Microsoft recommends. Also, the 98 gigabytes of unallocated space has been moved to the far end. Next, relocate the Microsoft Reserve partition just before the Windows partition. Right-click on the partition and click on the resize option. Click and hold the left mouse button on the small reserved partition. Drag all the way to the right, and then release the mouse button. Make sure that the free space following is 0. Click the resize button, and then apply. As you can see, the Microsoft Reserve partition has been moved just before the Windows partition, and the unallocated 924 megabytes of space has been moved to the left, or right next to the EFI system partition. And then finally, you need to enlarge the EFI system partition from 100 megabytes to 1 gigabyte. But there is a problem here. You see, when you previously shrank or enlarged the partitions, the file systems on them shrank or enlarged automatically. This will not be the case with EFI system partition, as its file system is FAT32. The FAT32 file system will not automatically resize. You have to do it manually. So before you expand the EFI system partition, you should create a backup of its contents. Right-click on the EFI system partition and select the information option. Take note of this UUID and write it down somewhere. This is very important. You will need this UUID later when you enlarge the FAT32 file system. If you do not provide the same UUID when expanding the FAT32 file system, a new UUID will be assigned. As a result, Windows 11 will then consider this as a different Windows computer with no activation. Double-click on the terminal icon to open the terminal window. List the partitions. For me, the EFI system partition is the first partition /dev/VDA1 with FAT32 file system. The same UUID is displayed here as well. Mount your EFI system partition to /MNT. Create a temporary directory called ESP for the backup. Back up your ESP files to the newly created directory. Mount your EFI system partition from /MNT. Return to the gparted GUI manager. Right-click on the EFI system partition and select the resize option. Click and hold the left mouse button on the right edge of the ESP just above the right arrow symbol. Drag all the way to the right, and then release the mouse button. Click the resize button, and then apply. As expected, you will receive this error message after enlarging the partition. The error message details clearly show that the partition was expanded to 1 GB. However, the file system was not. There is no need to worry. Just press the close button. Now go back to the terminal window. Reformat the ESP using the FAT32 file system. Use the same UUID that you wrote down earlier. For me, this is the UUID. I will just copy and paste. You can also do the same. Just replace the UUID with your own. You also have to remove the dash from the UUID. Mount your newly formatted EFI system partition to /MNT. Restore your previous backup from the ESP directory to the MNT directory. Unmount your EFI system partition from /MNT. Return to the gparted GUI manager again. Click the gparted menu, then refresh devices. As you can see, the EFI system partition has been enlarged to 1 GB with about 30 megabytes of used space and about 990 megabytes of free space. This free space will be sufficient to accommodate multiple Linux operating systems. Bootloaders, all the partitions have been resized and aligned as desired. You can now shut down your computer. Unplug the gparted live USB drive and boot into Windows 11. Open the terminal with admin privileges. List your volumes. As you can see, the volume's health status is warning. Because the partitions were recently resized, Windows needs to rescan the volumes. So first, get the volume names. First, run check disk on the recovery partition. Next, run check disk on the EFI system partition. Because the volume is already in use, you will be prompted to force unmount it first. Answer no by pressing the N key. You will be asked if you want to schedule a disk check at the next boot. Answer yes by pressing the Y key. Finally, run check disk on the C drive, which is the Windows volume. Schedule the disk check for the next boot. Reboot the system. The disk volume checking process will begin. If there are any issues, they will be automatically fixed. When the process is complete, Windows will reboot automatically. Check the volumes once more. As you can see, the status of all volumes is now healthy. Resizing and aligning the Windows partitions is now complete. Next, you need to disable hibernation in Windows 11. It is recommended to disable hibernation on all operating systems in dual boot setup to avoid data loss. If you hibernate Windows and then start Linux, or hibernate Linux and then start Windows, you may damage the EFI system partition. To see if hibernation is enabled or disabled on your system, run this command. If the output is 1, then hibernation is enabled. If the output is 0, then hibernation is disabled. So to disable hibernation, open the registry editor application. Expand local machine. Expand system. Expand current control set. Expand control. Then session manager. Click on power. On the right panel, double click on Hyperboot enabled. Change the value from 1 to 0. Press OK. Close the registry editor. Check the hibernation status again. As you can see, the hibernation feature has now been disabled. Now, shut down Windows 11. Do not reboot. This is very important. You need to completely shut down the computer. Once the system has been shut down, insert the Ubuntu USB installer and boot your system using the Ubuntu installer in UEFI mode. Choose your system language. I will choose English. If you want to enable any accessibility feature, you can enable them here. I will simply click Next. Select your keyboard layout. I will use the default US English. Choose how you want to connect to the internet. I will use the wired connection. Choose the interactive installation method. Choose what apps you want to install. Because I am installing Ubuntu for demonstration purposes, I will just use the default selection option. Click Next. If you want to install proprietary software, you can select them here. I will not install any, so I will simply click Next. Choose the manual installation method. You will now be on the manual partitioning screen. First, you need to mount the EFI system partition. So select the partition with the VFAT file system. Click on the change button. Leave this option as is. Do not format it. Leave it in VFAT format. This is very important. Otherwise, you will not be able to boot into Windows 11. Set the mount point to /boot/EFI and click the OK button to finish. Next, you must create a 1 GB new partition. This partition won't be used for Ubuntu, but rather for the System Rescue toolkit. Select the free space and click on the plus sign to create a partition. Set the partition size to 1024 megabytes, which is 1 gigabyte. Set the file system to leave unformatted. Once Ubuntu is installed, I will install the System Rescue toolkit on this partition. For now, press OK. Finally, you must create a partition to install Ubuntu. Select the free space again and click on the plus sign to create a partition. I will use all the remaining space. I will set the file system to ext4. You can change it to another file system if you want. Set the mount point to / which is root file system. And click OK to finish. All of the partitions required to install Ubuntu have been created. This is how the final partition layout should look. Please make sure that only these 2 partitions are formatted. Do not format the VFAT file system. Click Next. Provide your username, password, and other details. Select your location. Click Next. And finally, click on the Install button to begin the installation. Installation is now complete. Click the Restart Now button to restart the system. As you can see, the Grub menu now includes a link to Windows 11. You can now boot into Windows 11 if you want to. You will now be logged into Ubuntu Desktop. which features the all-new GNOME 46 desktop interface. The Ubuntu Desktop 2404 LTS installation is now complete. Next, I will enable ZRAM on Ubuntu. ZRAM is a Linux kernel module that creates a compressed block device in RAM. This compressed block device is then used as the swap. As a result, ZRAM allows Linux to make better use of memory by storing more pages in the compressed swap. ZRAM is also considered to be significantly faster than a traditional swap on SSD or HDD devices. Open the GNOME terminal. And check what type of swap Ubuntu is currently using. As you can see from the output, Ubuntu is currently using a 4 GB swap file. The swap file is located in the root. You need to replace the swap file with ZRAM. So first, disable swap file. Delete the swap file. Open the fstab file. And remove the line that mentions the swap file. Save and exit. Install the package ZRAM config. Enable the ZRAM config service. As you can see, Ubuntu now uses ZRAM. Get more information about ZRAM. The compression method used in ZRAM is LZO with run length encoding. Find out what other compression methods your system supports. While the default compression method is LZORLE, I will switch to ZSTD. ZSTD provides the highest compression ratio. When compared to LZORLE, to switch, first open the file in it ZRAM swapping. Duplicate this line. And make these changes. Save and exit. Reboot the system. Check the CRAM again. As you can see, the compression algorithm is now ZSTD. The ZRAM setup on Ubuntu is now complete. Next, I will enroll the machine owner key. Machine owner key, or MOK for short, is an alternative key management system for secure boot. MOK allows end users to add their own key to the MOK list. This key can then be used to validate a custom kernel when secure boot is enabled. I will generate a public and private X509 key pair with RSA 2048 bit string. First, create a new file called mok.cfg. In the var lib shinsigns mok directory. Add these lines to the config file. I copied and pasted these lines from my blog post on the same subject as this video. I will include a link to the blog post in the description. I have set the bit strength to 2048. Change the common name to something more specific to you. Email address is optional. You can either set it or leave it. This flag indicates that the certificate was self-signed rather than issued by a certificate authority. Save and exit. Create an X509 certificate key pair. I will set the validity period to 15 years. To enroll the key using the mock-util tool, the X509 certificate must be in DER format. Use the config file you just created. mok.cfg. MOK private key. MOK public key in DER format. A pair of public and private keys have been created. Take a look at your public key. This is how my certificate looks like. Unique serial number. Common name. Validity period of 15 years. A strength of 2048 bits. And the flag CA false. While the certificate needs to be in DER format to enroll the key in MOK, it should be in PEM format to sign the binaries using the SB sign tool. So convert a certificate from DER to PEM format. Check the certificates. Enroll your key using the MockUtil tool. To enroll, you should use the DER formatted public key. You will be prompted for a one-time password. This password will be used to confirm your key selection in the next step. So enter any password. Reboot your system. You will see a blue screen of MOK Manager tool. Press any key to perform MOK management. Select the Enroll MOK option and press Enter. On the View Key 0 option, press Enter. You should now see the details of the key you're about to enroll. Make sure it is the key you created earlier. Press Enter. Select the Continue option and press Enter. Select Yes and press Enter. You will be prompted for the password. Enter the one-time password that you provided earlier. And then finally, select the reboot option to restart the system and continue booting into Ubuntu normally. Run this command to confirm that your key is indeed enrolled. You should see your key. Your key has been successfully enrolled, and you are now ready to sign any custom kernel. In the next section, I will install System Rescue Toolkit and show you how to sign a custom kernel. Although the dual boot setup with Windows 11 and Ubuntu is finished, I will add another small Linux distro called System Rescue Toolkit to the setup. This step is optional, but I strongly advise you to include System Rescue in the dual boot setup. It only takes 1 GB of space. If something goes wrong, you do not have to scramble for a USB rescue disk. System Rescue is a Linux system rescue toolkit that can be booted and used to manage or repair your system and data in case of a crash on both Linux and Windows computers. System Rescue includes a large number of Linux system utilities that can be used for both common tasks and rescue operations. It can also be used to back up data from the Windows computer that cannot be booted anymore. So go to the download page and download the System Rescue ISO. The ISO file has been downloaded. List the partitions on your disk. As you may recall, I had reserved VDA 5 partition with 1 GIB of space for System Rescue. Format the partition with ext4 file system. I will name the volume as rescue, but you can name it whatever you want. Next, create 2 temporary directories named source and target. Mount the System Rescue ISO that you downloaded in the source directory. Mount the VDA5 partition that you just formatted with ext4 file system. In the target directory, copy the whole sysresc cd directory from the source to the root of the target directory. Install a package called PESign. It is necessary to view the signature in the kernel. Check if the System Rescue kernel is signed. As you can see, the kernel is not signed. If you attempt to boot into System Rescue right now, you will fail. You will get the secure boot error. So sign the kernel with the key you created in the previous section. check for the signature in the kernel again. As you can see, the kernel now contains the signature. In your case, the common name should be something unique to you. Unmount the temporary directories. Remove the temporary directories. Now you need to add the system rescue boot link to the grub menu. In the /etc/grub.d directory, create a file called 50_systemrescue. Add these lines to it. I copied and pasted these lines from my blog post on the same topic as this video. I will add a link to the blog post in the description. The file system is identified by its label, rescue. If you have given the file system another label, replace it accordingly. Save and exit. Give the file executable permission. And update the grub. As you can see from the message, the system rescue entry has been added to the grub. Reboot the system to verify. The grub menu should now include a link to system rescue. Select the system rescue option and press enter. You will now be at the System Rescue Toolkit command line prompt. If you prefer to work graphically, type the command *X at the command line prompt. You will then be directed to the graphical interface. The installation of the System Rescue Toolkit is now complete. You can now turn off your computer. This concludes the video tutorial on how to properly dual boot Windows 11 and Ubuntu. I appreciate you staying with me all the way to the end. I hope you liked the video. I will see you in the next video. Until then, take care and goodbye.